Some of the difficulties with this theory that I'll be presenting is that it's so big. It's a theory of everything, and it correlates a lot with what Ken Wilber's theory was suggesting in his own theory of everything. In a sense, it's directly connected to Wilber's theory and inspired therefrom. However, there are some differences. Well, not so much differences, but it riffing off of what he's saying that changes the theory quite dramatically in some regards, perspectively speaking. But really, in another sense, is very much just that, just his theory, potentially, if correct, enhanced. So what it looks at is where Wilber, in many regards, is addressing the theory of everything from primarily, in a sense, the first-person perspective, although, of course, it is integral in that sense that he is presenting a case for all quadrants, which his very theory is founded on. However, it has sort of, and it's no disrespect for the theory itself, a sort of anthropomorphizing effect on kind of human cognition. However, if you extend it to all animals and all consciousness, and see how the biology plays a role on that, we can, I believe, enhance that theory. So to do that, you look at the effects of the four quadrants in development on all beings. In some regards, there is less science in a sense, because you're extending your own sentience into other beings, which in one regard is sort of impossible, but in another regard, we are inclusive of all those beings to some degree, because we are, evolutionarily speaking, the consequence of them. And so, in that regard, especially through the integral theory lens, we have inherent in us all those evolutionary traits. And that's essential in addressing this theory and being able to make sense of it and have some sort of empiricism, in a sense, that backs it up. This theory is presenting a fractal pattern that is suggestive of where we're going next, as integral theory is suggesting, but where integral theory often doesn't have much to say about the exteriors. It has great things to say about the interiors, and that's developmental psychology primarily. The exteriors, though, if what I'm going to say about the four quadrants holds, then it's going to be the case that the next developmental step, in regards, will be directly correlated with a particular quadrant in some sense. So, as Wilber says, all quadrants are ever present. The quadrants, again, are first person, second person, third person, and fourth person in some regards, or I, we, it, and its. So, I being sort of psychological, interiority, thoughts, feelings, emotions, we being meaning-making, relational, connectivity between beings, between sentience, it being objectivity, empiricism, behaviorism, and its being sort of systems theory, autopoiesis, chaos theory, and these sorts of things. I will argue that the primary drive pre-reptiles is to create individuation. So you can see this in a sense as step 0. It's pre-self sense, pre-real interiority in the regards that the being does not have any sort of interior motivation of sentience. So it's not the sentience that's driving it. Where Whereas when you get to reptiles, it actually is the sentience. So there's a mode of control through the reptile. And this, you can look at like fish, which is immediately evolutionarily speaking prior in many regards, especially early fish, to reptiles, and they have about a 3-second memory. So the actual ability to self-recognize what it's going to do isn't yet present in a fish. It relies on the group instinct to react, and thereby the fish are going to get eaten. It's just a consequence of where the fish is in relation to the group to determine which ones are going to get eaten, which ones aren't. Whereas with reptiles, the individual actually makes the instinctual choices that allows it to survive or die and reproduce and so forth. So survival of the fittest fits very well with the reptilian beings on the planet, right? Reptiles, in other words. But when you get to mammals, and with reptiles there's a reptilian brainstem that distinguishes it. Therefore, within our Turin brain, we have that reptilian instinct, so we've included it. This is an inclusive theory. And another important topic that I've left out up to this point is that in individuation, the being is primarily living to survive. In other words, to get food stuff for itself. So the actual physiology is crafted such that it is making itself best to survive, as the theory of survival of the fittest points out. So the being itself is actually being crafted through its evolutionary passage to adapt to become the most fit to survive. Whereas when you move to mammals, the evolutionary intent, in a sense, shifts to relationality, or what is most important to evolution, or the beings that are an expression of evolution at that point, is the relational drive. In other words, to create social connections that enhance their relational capacities. Of course, there is a survivalistic imperative still there, because this theory transcends and includes that which went before, but the move, or the centrality of importance is moved now to more or less a relational drive, whereas with humans we become the tool makers. This is a resultant of our neocortex, whereas the mammals were relational drive was a limbic system on the physiological side adaptation. Humans have the neocortex, which allows us to reason and become proper tool makers, and this requires self-reflexivity, or the ability to objectify what a self is. And therefore, we can manipulate outside objects because we ourselves know what we are in relation to the outside world. So, this has been ever increasing in our tool-making capacities through the ages, and we have started just at this time to recognize the fact that there are these 4 quadrants always impinging on every moment, and in so doing, this realization itself is enhancing evolution, because with the further realization that every moment we're experiencing and enacting the 4 quadrants, we are in fact objectifying the 4 quadrants, and in so doing, that map itself is like the 4th quadrant